I'm Jan Koopman. I'm currently treasurer of the board. I was the very first staff member for HIV/AIDS services when Red Project began over 20 years ago.
My name is Ellen Roloffs, and I am a medical case manager at the Red Project.
My name is Harold Clark, and I am the HIV Prevention Program Manager here at the Grand Rapids Red Project. I've been with the organization since May of 2019, so I guess we can say that I've been here a year and a half now.
Well, my name is Michael Lamb. Feel free to call me Miss Mikey. I'm a 29-year-old man, gay man, and I am affiliated with Red Project because I used to work at the Kent County Health Department doing EIS. And when I got to the health department, that's government work, and I'm more familiar with the trench and community work, and I know that's what Red Project does. So I was like, hey, let's trade elbows.
My name is Roman Black. I am 27 years old. Originally born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, moved to Orlando, Florida, and then recently just moved up to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Upon my arrival to Grand Rapids, Michigan, I connected with a fellow advocate in the HIV/AIDS world, and they informed me about the Red Project, about just getting together with them, working with them, and then also because I already advocate for HIV/AIDS, they're like, hey, this would be a good resource, for you to reach out to. So that's how I've heard about the Red Project. I love it. I think the work that they do is amazing, and I'm excited to continue working with them.
My name is Ryan, and I'm a clinical pharmacist at Mercy Health. So I work very closely with the providers there, kind of helping with all aspects of medication. So helping with looking for drug interactions and side effects and answering questions about, can I take this medication with this medication, all sorts of things like that. And I know of the Red Project because we work very closely together, helping out clients. So, I'll work very closely with the Red Project whenever they're meeting with someone who may have questions about medication or a drug interaction or a possible side effect. And then I'll reach out to a lot of the early intervention folks there, or reach out to the case managers there, and we'll kind of help coordinate care and, hopefully have good outcomes for folks that we, meet with together.
Going into work in HIV/AIDS in 1991, after having spent almost 20 years working for the government in Washington, was really a life-changing thing. For me, I made more money working for the government in Washington than I ever made doing AIDS. But it was so rewarding because we really made a difference in people's lives. We were doing this in the early to mid 90s when there was no federal money. All the support for the Grand Rapids AIDS Resource Center came from the community. And people were angry at the stigma around HIV/AIDS. And I met the most wonderful people, the partners and caregivers of people who were dying of AIDS. And back then, everybody we knew died. And that got to be very hard. After 5-6 years of that, I needed a break. But then a couple of years later, someone said, we're starting a new agency in town. We want to do needle exchange. And I have been a long-time advocate of that. And we started HIV/AIDS services, which became Red Project. And it's kind of the central force in my life is working on HIV/AIDS and LGBTQ inclusion.
Well, I've been living with HIV for a number of years, so before I ever worked at the Red Project, and so it's something I had to kind of learn to navigate with friends and family and in romantic relationships. And I actually, I've been really lucky that I haven't lost any people in my life because of it. I've had really positive experiences with acceptance. But since working at the Red Project, it's been a really personally fulfilling experience because I get to work with so many different people, just a wide array of people who all share the same struggle that I do. And it's a really kind of cool connection to have.
Well, I can tell you for a fact that HIV/AIDS has directly affected me in one form or another. Full disclosure, I've been around since the beginning of HIV/AIDS, and that was in the early 1980s. And regrettably, I've lost most of my social network in the 1980s and 90s because of HIV/AIDS. And it has had some type of impact on my mental health because it got to a point where I was really afraid to make new friends, especially somebody who was in my age group, because history had shown me that once I do make a friend, they die off. And if not by the grace of God, I'm still around.
Well, HIV has affected me personally. I was diagnosed with HIV December 19th of 2012, and 2 years after my diagnosis, I lost a friend to complications of AIDS. And that propelled me to use my diagnosis as an example that one, it could happen to everybody, because I never thought I'd be one of those people. I used to perpetuate the stigma that is now put onto me as a person living with HIV. So talk about karma in a sense, right? And doing the work, I just met a lot of people like me that don't look like me. And even though we have the same status, we have totally different stories leading up to that shared status. And the work that Red Project does, it kind of balances the work that needs to be done to eradicate AIDS, and also furthering the work of people who, do sex work, people who are using drugs, and people who just need help on a community level that don't either have the health literacy or that access to adequate and equitable health care.
So HIV/AIDS has affected me because I am HIV positive. I know most people don't say it with such a smiling or gleeful way, but I think it's really important that we continue to create the narrative around HIV/AIDS in a more positive way, meaning I'm not dying from it. I'm not going to die simply because I have HIV. And that's how it's affected my life. Prior to me becoming HIV positive, I wanted to take my own life. And I tried to take my own life several times. And upon becoming positive and working with mental health professionals, I was able to not only realize that I have a lot more offer to this world, but I'm now able to navigate my own professional career within the HIV/AIDS world. I have started several projects that have been surrounded by HIV. I have worked with several nonprofits that have worked within the realm of HIV. I have saved people's lives that have become HIV positive as well. And I just think that the more we continue to put a negative connotation to HIV, the more there will be negativity surrounding it. And that's why, one, I say that with such a happiness, and two, why I continue to do the work that I do, and why I will always continue to tell people that I am HIV positive.
I'm a pharmacist that specifically works with HIV medications, which is kind of a really small, subspecialty to go into. So I work just primarily with those medications and the interactions and the, side effects that they can sometimes cause. And it was an area that I kind of chose to get into specifically because it's an area where I feel like a pharmacist can be of a whole lot of benefit. These medications have a lot of interactions sometimes, and they have a lot of side effects, and all of those things make it hard to sometimes take the medication every single day in order to kind of be successful with it. And having a pharmacist to be able to kind of come alongside folks and help them get through some of the side effects and kind of some of the downsides was an area that I thought I could be of benefit, and it's something that I've enjoyed doing for my professional career.
Well, thinking back to the mid to late 90s on global solidarity as the new medicines, the new cocktails came out, and they showed real promise, and people were getting better. You know, no one's cured of HIV/AIDS, but people were able to manage the symptoms and didn't progress. And then we knew that in poorer countries around the world, AIDS was having a terrific impact, proportionately much greater than in America. And we started being very American and saying, well, you know, we can't give these drugs to those poor countries. Those poor people, those other people, they don't know enough to take medicines. So initially it was like, you know, they don't know enough to do that right anyway. So we'll just keep the medicines for rich third world people or first world people. And it's just wrong. And I had many, 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 many differences with George W. Bush when he was president. But what he did was establish that global relief fund, and medicines went to the other countries, went around the world, and hundreds of thousands of people's lives have been made better because of access to those medicines. And that was just so paternalistic and superioristic of us to say, well, they can't do it, so never underestimate what people will do to save their lives and make the lives of them and their families better.
On an international level, we need to be supporting medication and resource access for everyone, but I like that they use the term globally because that really includes everyone, not just other countries. And I think we need to look at like within our own communities and realize that every single person is at risk, and we have a shared responsibility to every single person in our communities. It's what makes it a community, is that people are interconnected and rely on one another, and realizing that that extends to each and every person.
Global solidarity means to me that citizens of the world are all, how would you say, they're all together on this because it isn't just an American problem or a European problem or a gay problem or a person who injects drugs problem. It's something that affects each and every individual here, not just in the United States, but in the world.
Global solidarity means everyone has a part and everyone needs to do their part and overextend themselves in certain areas and don't let those boundaries in place by, you know, systemic rules and barriers. Go through those barriers, break that glass ceiling, and again, do your part to the best of your ability and know your role, know where you're at, know when it's time to step up and speak up, or know when it's time to step back and listen. And trench work, again, is for every single person. So do your part. If it's, you know, blocking a highway, if it's, you know, testing people within the community, if it's disclosing your status, if it's, you know, giving a referral to the Red Project or giving a referral to somebody who has a small business, you know, always do your part to stop HIV, because that's what will ultimately end AIDS. Everybody has a role, so do it.
So global solidarity in terms of HIV really has to deal with coming together on a global scale, right? I think the words explain themselves, but being solid on a global scale in terms of storytelling. So what I mean by that is, to people that are negative from HIV, right, are not shaming or shunning away the folks that are positive, and vice versa. The individuals that are positive are not shaming or shunning the individuals that are negative, or maybe on PrEP, right? We are all able to solidly come together and explain one story around HIV, right? HIV is not death. HIV is not threatening, right? Those simple messages that are very much conducive to our community. And that still shows us on a very solidified and connecting goal.
I think solidarity, you know, from my perspective, is looking really a lot at just shared resources and shared information, and kind of coming at the virus as a group. So, you know, whenever we find new information about maybe there's a new drug that's coming to market, or we have new information about how we can maybe better use a medication to treat a different type of resistance, you know, so any sort of information with regards to best practices, quality improvement, just shared information on a global scale, I think is extremely important. You see a lot of times nowadays where you know, there's great innovation that's happening in other parts of the world that we can learn quite a bit from, just with regards to how new HIV meds are available on the market and how they're being used to, you know, combat the virus. So I think global solidarity from my perspective, again, as kind of a medication and kind of pharmacy expert, is super important with regards to research and just kind of shared ideas with regards to innovation. Because, you know, we sometimes here in the US think that we do things the best all the time, and that's not always the truth. We can definitely learn from everyone on a global scale how to best come together to tackle this virus.
And it became more and more and more apparent to us that what we were doing in HIV/AIDS prevention wasn't fair. I mean, we were preaching safe sex and condom use to everybody whose risk factor was sex, but we were just telling people who injected drugs, well, you just quit, because we couldn't give them anything that would protect them. So and the research was all that syringe exchange is effective. It reduces HIV, it reduces hepatitis, it does not increase drug use. And we kept making the case, and there was one person in particular, his picture is up there on the wall somewhere. His name was Dan, and Dan talked to the mayor of Grand Rapids at that time every chance he got. They both went to Fountain Street Church, and talked to him at coffee hour. And then one day, Dan called me up. He says, "The mayor's going to talk about syringe exchange in his State of the City address." Whoa! And he did, and set up a drug policy task force. And it took a year of this task force working, but at the end we recommended there be syringe exchange in Grand Rapids.
Shared responsibility ties right into that for me, because, you know, I think that a lot of people think that HIV isn't something that affects their friend group, them, you know, people they care about, but it's very much alive and well in our communities, in our country. HIV is, and so I think we need to recognize the shared responsibility we have to caring for people with HIV and preventing the spread of it.
There is a shared responsibility in that it is everybody's responsibility to at least know about HIV/AIDS, but at the same time, it's everybody's responsibility to know your status. No matter what your status is, it is the responsibility of all people involved. For instance, you know, something as simple as wearing a condom when you're having sex, because basically what it is that if you're sleeping with somebody, in addition to sleeping with that individual, you are sleeping with every individual that person slept with. But generally speaking, it's the responsibility of everybody to protect themselves from HIV/AIDS. And as I said, one of the most simple things would be using a condom when you're having sex.
Sweet. So the last thing is kind of open-ended, so you can answer it however you want. But we've been asking people if they could give viewers a message that encompasses this year's global theme. What would that be?
I would say know your status. The reason why I say that is because in this day and age now, there are very effective treatments for HIV, but in order to access those things, you need to know your status. If you are negative, there are ways to keep you negative, and as I said, one of them is condoms, the other one happens to be PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis. And PrEP is basically a medication that you take once a day, which creates a chemical bond in your body, or it's a chemical thing that prevents your body from, prevents HIV from taking hold in your body. And it's very easy to take. It's not a lot of pills, it's just one pill a day. And it's been shown to be at least 95% effective when it comes to not acquiring AIDS sexually.
Shared responsibility, and that's kind of self-explanatory. We all have this responsibility to end AIDS, and in doing that, we cannot allow anybody else to fall through the cracks. The CDC and just general knowledge for people that work in public health, HIV specifically, we know that Black trans folks, specifically Black trans women, are getting not only wrong reporting by giving them a dead name or giving them the sex they were assigned at birth, but we also don't give them the correct tools to live with HIV or give them the proper methods to prevent such a life-changing and life-altering diagnosis, right? So my responsibility as a white queer man, that's putting myself in these spaces and not being a voice for the voiceless, but since the attention's on me, let me go ahead and take this mic and pass it over, because not only do we need safe spaces, we need brave spaces. And not everybody will have that fire in them to be brave. So again, you got to meet people where they're at. If they're a collectivist, a social media activist, then let them have that platform. Let that responsibility be on them, and let them build their empire and propel the revolution that way. Shared responsibility, like I said earlier, everybody has their role to play in the responsibility of ending AIDS. And I think a lot of people, particularly white people in power, want to give these stipends or give these, Amazon gift cards for something like that. And it's like, well, this Amazon gift card ain't gonna feed me tonight. This Amazon gift card isn't gonna allow me to, wash my ass tonight. This Amazon gift card isn't gonna pay for my HRT, for my Ubers, and all of those other things. So it's really knowing what communities you serve, giving them the tools to serve their communities, but also knowing what those tools look like for that community.
So I'm really actually happy that the theme globally is shared responsibility this year. I get into these arguments all the time where, sorry, to backtrack, I have always ever dated older men, right? When I say older, I don't mean like 5 or 6 years, I mean like 10 to 15 to 25 years older than myself. And one of the arguments that I mainly get into is this, what seems to be a battle between the younger generation not being interested in the older story or the AIDS epidemic story, vice versa, the older generation not being willing to share their story with the younger generation, right? And me being this middle person, having always dated older individuals and still being a younger person, right? I sort of look at both generations and I'm like, get it together, because our shared responsibility, at least from my aspect, is to break down those walls. The older generation, it's your responsibility to share that story, whether they're listening or not. But if you don't share your story, how will we learn? And for the younger generation, it's our responsibility to ask about that story, whether they want to tell it or not. But if we're not asking, how do they know that they want to hear? How do they know we want to hear it? That simple form of storytelling, that very simple action of asking, goes longer, goes faster, goes harder than some doctor in a building telling us to take a pill. That simple act of revealing our vulnerability reaches more people than somebody in some building at some nonprofit telling us that this isn't going to kill us. So share your story and share your vulnerability with each other, because that'll help us, and that'll be a bigger shared responsibility than anything else.
Well, I'm wearing a mask. That's about shared responsibility. A mask protects yourself, but almost more importantly, if you happen to be infected with COVID, you're protecting others, and that's what shared responsibility is all about. And I hope that we here in Grand Rapids can work with multi-agencies, because there's lots of different factors in a person's life with HIV/AIDS, and there's their cultural community, there's health, there's support, there's all different ways that different parts of the community can come together and make a real impact, a positive impact on how people can be protected from getting HIV/AIDS by making good decisions about their behavior, and how people can live longer, healthier lives. If we all chip in and help.
I think that solidarity is something that happens within a group. There's a component of mutual support in solidarity, unity and support towards a shared goal. And I think, we're talking about HIV and the goal of eliminating HIV ultimately. In order to really have solidarity, there has to be some understanding and mutual respect to really achieve that unity and that support. And I think my message to people would be just to try to understand where your brothers and sisters are coming from, and really, this is the basis for harm reduction, which is something we talk about a lot at the RED Project, is getting to know people and understanding what's important to them, what are their struggles, what are their values and priorities. And a couple things happen there. One, you realize that other people aren't that different from you. We all have the same human needs and struggles. And two, to see really what people need in their lives and what's going to work for them. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody, and we need to respect those differences when we're working together.
A lot of people are under the misconception that AIDS and HIV is basically a white gay man's disease. Maybe it was, or it was just seen in the gay community back in the early 1980s and through the 90s. But I just want to throw a few statistics out. And one of them happens to be that youth, the age group of 13 to 24, 44% of the people in this age group have HIV and they don't know it. 60% of new HIV infections involve African Americans, and approximately 64% of HIV/AIDS diagnoses among women, 64% of them happen to be Black women. So it's to everybody's advantage to at least get tested to know your status. If you are HIV positive, we here at RED Project can facilitate getting you into treatment right away. If you are HIV negative, we can also help facilitate you getting on PrEP.
Just be resilient. There's a lot going on this year. 2020 has been a crazy year, but resiliency is something that is super important, both in the face of HIV, but also in the face of everything that we're going through this year. So support each other, continue to reach out to folks, even in a virtual way, kind of like what we're doing here, just to support each other. There's lots of little things that you can do, even in a virtual setting, just to let someone know that you're thinking about them. But yeah, check in on folks. There's a real tendency for us to get isolated with all the quarantine and everything that's going on now. So, just work together to be resilient and support each other in that setting of solidarity. And we'll get through 2020 as a group.
Do the work. Know the work, understand the work, and complete it to the best of your ability. And know that the work is continuously internal. Know your biases, know your privileges, and before anything, if you're going to get into this realm of public health, specifically HIV advancement, HIV prevention, and HIV treatment, you got to know your status, because we all have one, and we all may not be positive, but we're all clean.
If I can give y'all one message to really take home from this, it's love one another, love yourself, and share that with the world. Because it's not fair. It's not fair that we bottle it up. Because you never know what your story will do for someone else. You never know what your vulnerability will do to save a life. You never know what sharing your message will do for your life. So share it and save someone today.